All right, Team Bucks, special treat for you all today. We are joined by author and former Navy SEAL Jack Carr. His newest book out now is Savage Son. He's also the author of The Terminal List and True Believer. Mr. Carr, how you doing, sir?
Doing great. How are you there in New York City?
I'm in a little bit of a rougher spot in terms of geographic location right now than you are. I think you're out in Utah, right? So things here are a little rougher than out there, but I'm glad you're doing well.
Yep. No, we're in Utah. I wanted to raise our kids in a ski town, so we came up here after I got out of the military, left Coronado, and yeah, it's not too bad up here. But,
I have a feeling you probably have sufficient breathing room / plenty of ammunition, storable food, potable water. I'm just gonna guess all those things.
So yeah, I've always been into being prepared from even before my SEAL team days. But yeah, we were good with the ammo and the guns, of course, and then food, water, filtration systems, ways to make fire, all those little things so that you can focus bandwidth where it needs to go in times of crisis. So I felt good. Finally, my wife's like, "Oh, now I see why we've been preparing for these things all these years." And so anyway, we feel good about that part of it anyway.
So I want to talk about your books a bit, Jack. But first, I thought we would let everybody know a bit more about who you are and how you got to this point where now you're writing thriller. By the way, how would we classify thriller action novel? I mean, it's not really espionage, right? So thriller along the lines of go ahead.
It's like it's a political thriller, same type of books that Brad Thor, Vince Flynn, Nelson DeMille, Stephen Hunter, those kind of novels. So political thriller is how it's classified.
All right, but people are going to want to know that they hear former Navy SEAL and they want to know some of the background there. How did you tell us where'd you start out and how'd you get into the teams?
Yeah, so I wanted to do two things my entire life. One was serve my country in uniform, specifically as a Navy SEAL, and the other was to write fiction. And I wanted to go in the military at first because I grew up with the idea of my grandfather as my hero. He was killed in World War II. He flew the Corsair, which is a plane that had the gull wings that would fold up on aircraft carriers. So I grew up with the silk maps they used to give aviators back then, his medals, black and white photos of him and his squadron. And Black Sheep Squadron was on TV at the time, starring Robert Conrad. So this is the late 70s, early 80s. And I just knew that was the path I was going to take. I was going to serve my country in the uniform. It was a calling. Then I found out very early on what SEALs were. And my dad, I was watching football. My dad would watch football on the weekends, and there was those four channels, as you may or may not remember: ABC, CBS, NBC, and then there was the one outlier channel that always seemed to have a World War II movie on, playing opposite football on Sundays. So during commercials, I got to go up and watch what was on that opposite channel and watch that war movie. And in one of them, they had these guys coming up over the beach, putting explosives on obstacles in advance of a conventional force landing. And I asked my dad who these guys were, and he said Frogmen, because that was the name of the movie. And I said, "Well, what are the Frogmen? These look awesome." And he said, "Go ask your mother." And my mom was a librarian, so we grew up surrounded by books, this love of reading, and went to do some research at the local library, found out what SEALs were. And so from that age, from 7 on, I knew that I would one day make it into the SEAL teams, or at least I try out. I test myself in that crucible that was BUD/S.
When did you start doing your own version of like the Rocky training montage when he's in Russia in the snow? Was 14-year-old, was 16-year-old Jack Carr doing push-ups in like freezing water somewhere? I mean, how did you get ready for this?
This is true. So, of course, I was a big fan of the Rocky movies, and so was my dad. So early on, we were watching those movies, and I was sprinting up the hills by our house, and I was trying to do pull-ups, like early version of CrossFit. And you'd see some other movies.
You actually were inspired by the Rocky movies a little bit.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we had the bar that we'd put up that would always seem to fall down when you're on your like 10th or 11th pull-up as a little kid in the hallway. So yeah, I was inspired by those movies because we love those movies because it's the underdog. It's the guy that gets knocked down and gets up and keeps moving forward. So it's we were all drawn to those, which is why they're so popular. So even before Rocky was training in Siberia, to fight Ivan Drago, the height of the Cold War, I was inspired by those films, running up and down the hills and doing those things to prepare for where I was going, because I always knew that I was going to the SEAL teams. And the two things that I found out during that research at the library was that, hey, these guys are some of the most elite special operations forces in the world, and the training is some of the toughest ever devised by a modern military. So I was in, and I was focused on it really for my entire life.
Now, is there anything that once you got in, and people are more familiar now with with buds than they would have been years ago because of all there was I think a Discovery Channel series. So, we've seen your brothers in uniform freezing their butts off in the surf and all. We people have some familiarity with those basics, and also there have been a couple of movies that have gone into, and I don't know how sensationalized the training was or how accurate it was. I can tell you that the CIA training in movies is always basically crap, but I think the buds training looks like it's more accurate, more true to life. So you get in, and what's your, around what year do you start, and when do you have your first combat deployment?
Yep. So I came in 96, got to Buds in January 97, and went through Buds. Got to my first SEAL team in October 97. So it's obviously 9/11 has not happened. And we think we're all showing up at these SEAL teams, and we're going to get the pagers, and they're going to give us all this awesome gear, and we're going to, be at somebody's wedding or maybe at the bar, and the pager will go off, and then we'll zip off and save the world.
Charlie Sheen style. You were gonna jump off a Jeep off the bridge.
Yeah, a friend of mine actually did that. Yeah, Adam Brown did that. Sadly, he was killed, but he's not doing that. But an amazing guy, but called Fearless, documents his life. But an amazing guy. But yeah, we all thought that's what we were going to do. And then we got to this first SEAL teams, and they handed us brooms, mops, said, go paint that wall, go clean that bathroom, do new guy stuff. So in those days, our job was to be prepared for war. So we joined our platoons. We went through these 18-month workup cycles where you're doing land warfare, desert warfare, mountain warfare, jumping out of planes, diving, doing your close quarter battle stuff, urban warfare, and you're training with the guys you're going to go downrange with, so that when you go downrange, if the call comes, you're the first guys to go in that area of the world. So the job was to prepare for war. Of course, September 11th happened. That was on my second deployment. So I had one pre-September 11th deployment. Then second one is when September 11th happens, and we're in Guam. The phones start ringing up and down the hallways. People start knocking on doors, waking people up. And then we go down to the basement where we had one TV, and we watched the Twin Towers fall on television. And then it's been back and forth to the Middle East ever since. And the interesting thing is that everybody that wasn't deployed at the time thought they were going to miss it. Guys that were stateside are like, oh man, I can't believe I'm not deployed. I'm going to miss it. It's going to be over by the time I get over there. And here we are almost 20 years later, still engaged in both those regions of the world. So nobody was in danger of missing it in hindsight.
We are speaking to Jack Carr. He's a former Navy SEAL and author of Terminal List, True Believer. His latest is Savage Son. And I've actually started reading it, so I'll have to bring him back at some point when I have my full review on it. I try to read the books of people that come on the show beforehand, but given the world falling apart right now, it's been a pretty busy time, Jack. But tell me a bit about we're talking about your deployments. I had the experience of being a CIA analyst, so one of those little civilian guys dressed like I'm on a camping trip, walking around trying to help you and your guys actually go do war fighting. I was like pointing, the bad guys are over there, get them. Where was nice. Were you Iraq or Afghanistan? I'm assuming you got sent to Afghanistan first, but where'd you go?
Yep. So I've spent time in Afghanistan and Iraq. Most of my time was in Iraq. But interestingly enough, the second novel, True Believer, is really based off something that happened to me in Iraq in 2006 when I was working for your former organization. And it was one of the highlights of my time in uniform, being the only military person attached to this covert action program that they had going on over there at the time with primarily indigenous forces. And we had one guy that was an Iraqi who was just head and shoulders above his peers when it came to battlefield leadership, when it came to the close target reconnaissance, when it came to planning, when it came to having to flex out there when the bullets started flying. Because typically at least my experience was that a lot of times they were hesitant to make decisions because coming from a place where you're a subject, not a citizen, if you took initiative on the battlefield and you messed up, it was kind of like off with your head type thing. They didn't encourage you to learn from your mistakes in a lot of the parts of the world where we went. So with this guy, he took risks on the battlefield. He adapted quickly on the battlefield. And then years down the line, I got word that he disappeared. And I thought, what if I fictionalize this and turn this into a novel here? So that was the basis for True Believer. So you might like that, and you might remember some of those days back there in Iraq in 2006, running and gunning right around the time of the Golden Mosque bombing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I saw it at the beginning of Savage Son. You had what I've seen in many of my former peers and friends, both either on the intel agency side or on the military side or a combination thereof. This was reviewed, and just FYI, these reviews are ridiculous. So I was like, yep, he went through the review process, because pretty sure if you talk about James Bond's exploding cufflinks, they'll find something in there to black out. I've been through that process myself.
Ridiculous. I mean, it's fiction. They get very liberal with those black Sharpie pens, government supply or taxpayer supplied, of course. And on the second one, True Believer, I appealed. So they took out 54 sections of the novel, which are blacked out in the hardback. Then I appealed during the time between the hardback came out and the paperback came out, and I won 37 of them on appeal. I should have won all of them, because my lawyers attached every single redaction to a publicly available government document. So not just on Wikipedia or somebody else's book, but you can actually just get it from the government, and they tie them all to those, but still won 37 of the 54. So when the paperback came out, I unredacted what was in what we won on appeal. And one of those was a country. They took out every single reference to Morocco. And in my story, the hero goes from Mozambique and he has to go somewhere to do some training. And so he goes, I made up a CIA black site in Morocco, just made it up. I've never been to Morocco in uniform. I went before I joined the military, and I loved it. I could describe the marketplace, I could describe the mountains, and I just loved the country. So I put it in there, and they blacked out everything that said Morocco, anything that said Atlas Mountains. They took out Moorish architecture, and a made-up airbase that does not even exist. They blacked out. But I ended up winning those on appeal, and so those are unredacted in the paperback version of
if you give away the secrets of 15th century North African architecture, my friend, I don't even know how you could show your face in any military bars anymore. It's crazy. And the stuff
business.
I've seen the stuff that they've, my favorite is when they start blacking out, they'll black out like the weapon that somebody was carrying. That's the equivalent of like, he had a blank, and then it'll say later on, he fired his AK-47. It's like, I don't think he was carrying 2 rifles, but I'm glad you guys got that the first time. But anyway,
ridiculous.
This is some insider stuff. I don't want to get too deep into it, because I know I want to ask you. I mean, you mentioned an incident when you were in Iraq and something that was the impetus for further thought processes. I mean, you were in the midst of a particularly nasty ambush. What was it, in Baghdad?
Yep. In the what neighborhood was it? Anyway, yeah, in Baghdad, and we were in the ambush because a couple weeks earlier, even though this was technically a sovereign Iraqi unit, because it was a sovereign country, obviously at the time, because we had Americans attached, particularly me, because I was the only person really in the military. The other people were from your organization. We went into a mosque, not me, but the sovereign Iraqi unit went in there because a bad guy was in there, like they tend to do, because they know that we're hesitant to hit them if they're in places of worship or hospitals or things like that. So they went in there and grabbed this guy a couple weeks earlier, and it caused a firestorm, of course. And so we tracked another guy to a similar location at night through some technical means. And so we parked outside. We just stopped a block away, and we had to wait, and we had to go down. I'm on the radio, and I'm trying to get the approvals from the military side of the house, and then have the agency side talk to the military side and go. So 45 minutes we're out there, maybe even an hour. We're just sitting there. Meanwhile, they're maneuvering on us. They're getting elevated positions on us, and then they all open up at one time, of course. But also what we've done is send our snipers up to some elevated positions at the same time. So it turned into this pretty crazy ambush that did not have to happen. We could have just rolled up, gone right in, grabbed this guy, been out of there. But because we had to wait and sit there and wait for senior level leadership to then approve it, which they didn't get a chance to because the ambush happened 45 minutes in. So we took a couple casualties, but nobody died. Got one of your guys took a round. I'll call it in the hip, although it took a round in the best place you can probably take a round, right in the butt. And then one of our indigenous forces got wounded as well, but everybody survived, and they weren't serious injuries. But our snipers being elevated, and then me being able to jump out and go coordinate with a QRF, a quick reaction force, a few blocks away. That while we were waiting, I had them move closer just in case so we could fall back and they could be laying down some fire with Bradleys and everything else that they had. So it was an interesting night. Very interesting night, but you feel very exposed out there while you're waiting for these senior level leaders to make their decisions from their comfortable tactical operation centers.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was in Baghdad and the cappuccino machine broke down, and it was a really people did not move fast enough for my liking, my friend. So we had very different experiences of the war zone.
To everyone, you should come to Chinatown. Precautions have been taken by our city. We know that there's a concern about tourism traveling all throughout the world, but we think it's very safe to be in Chinatown and hope that others will come.
That was before. Now we know what Pelosi's saying today, but just remember, I mean, Mike Malice and I, we talked about this, and it's the truth is that you can find these clips about anybody who was talking about this at the time. And you're operating at some level, and I was really in the early days of the pandemic when it became clear what we were dealing with. So I'd say that was maybe 3 weeks ago. I was beating myself up to close friends and family, just saying, I can't believe I missed this. I can't believe I missed this. And then I started to think more about it and realized, based on the data that we had, what we're being told, I mean, I can't see virology samples. I'm not able to go and count all the people in China who have died from this and what's really going on. You can only rely, it's a garbage in, garbage out situation with bad data. If the data you're getting is inaccurate, if it's just not true, there's very little that you can do to overcome that to give you good analysis. So I think that was a huge part of it, which is why the role of China in all of this is not something that we should ever allow to just fade away into down the memory hole. And this is important. Secretary Pompeo has also been willing to express his frustration about the World Health Organization. Here's what he said. Play 17.
It is completely appropriate that the world ask the right questions. And this is the president's frustration with the World Health Organization. That is the institution with the task, underwritten in part by the American people and countries all around the world. It is their task to protect the world from precisely what is happening today. And that means they need to get answers and data sets, and they need to demand that from the Chinese Communist Party. And the Chinese Communist Party needs to come clean about what took place there so the whole world can see what took place. When we do that, there'll be a time for accountability. We'll be able to attribute what happened, who did what, and we can move on from what is now an incident that has destroyed so much wealth, not only here in the United States, but all across the world.
There's a difference, my friends, between getting it wrong and making sure that others get it wrong. And that's the issue that we see with China. Okay, everybody has been lockdowning for the weekend. Some of you have been working. Thank you for doing that, by the way. But the rest of us have been in lockdown mode. I've decided to limit myself to ice cream on weekends. That's a good, I'm getting it going, and I'm now going to be on day 3 of my 100 push-ups, 100 squats challenge. Producer Mark, I do have to ask you to weigh in on an important question, though. Some people are saying that even if you're doing work from home, WFH, the cool acronym the kids are using these days, that you should dress up like you're going into an office. I think this is poppycock.
I 100% agree with you. That's ridiculous.
I can't imagine I'm gonna wear business casual to sit alone at my desk, or so that the dog feels like she has a fancier, personal butler and handler, because I am the dog's butler. I've realized, she rejects food if she doesn't like it, and it's good. I always feed her good stuff. I had to make her. She refused to eat chicken, fresh roast chicken, so I had to make her seared scallops the other day, and that she would eat. That's the kind of French bulldog I'm dealing with here.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't even eat fresh sea scallops.
Yeah.
I would. I just don't buy them.
Yeah. She loved it. I got to say that. Anything with butter sauce on it. I mean, it's true for humans too, right? Anything with butter sauce on it usually gets the job done. But yeah, I'm not a dress up. In fact, if anything, I think people are going to realize that telecommuting is a lot better than we had anticipated for people who can do it. But I'm saying it's a lot. You can get a lot more done in a lot of office jobs at home than folks have realized. And also, dressing to be comfortable is not a bad thing. Dressing to be comfortable is a good thing. And maybe we're going to evolve out of, I'm just going to say it and people get mad at me, suits should be for formal-ish occasions. Suits are for weddings. Suits are for, big parties, maybe a big fancy birthday if you're throwing that one for grandma or grandpa or something. But a suit to go sit at a desk? Nah. Nah, sorry. The Buckster is putting a thumbs down on that one, and producer Mark actually seems to agree.
Yeah, even when I work in studio, I mean, how often am I dressed up? Never.
I mean, I have seen you dressed up one time, and it was for your wedding, and
Yeah.
I think that was appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, naturally, if I'm the groom, I'm going to get dressed up.
Yes.
So one time in my life, it made sense.
But the men's business suit as a part of day-to-day wear for the office, I don't know, maybe people are going to get mad at me for this. They're going to say it's slovenly to wear, I mean, what are we really talking about, too? In business casual now, they make all these fabrics that look like they're dress shirt and look like they're slacks, but they have some kind of elastic in them, and they're so much better. It's getting athleisure, in essence, is becoming the standard, and I think that's a good thing. You look at all these futuristic movies, and people are wearing stuff that looks more like they're doing yoga than wearing like a worsted wool suit from England in the 1880s or something. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah, I agree. Practicality and comfort over how you look.
Practicality and comfort matters. All right. I also think it's good for your health, too. I think that people that wear, for example, painful shoes stresses you out, man. Stress out your whole body, bad for your back, bad for everything. I got ideas, and I like to share them. Okay, here we go. Mark, not to be confused with producer Mark. Buck, since beards are not recommended due to the coronavirus, perfect time to experiment with a buck stash. I'm trying to think what I would look like with just a mustache, and I do not think I would pull it off very well at all. I cannot say. Mark, have you ever gone? Did you ever do what is it, Brovember or something? When everyone grows a stash for prostate cancer,
it's a Movember where you don't shave at all.
Movember.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a not shave. See, I thought that was just a mustache thing. It's a not shave at all.
It's not shave at all. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I gotta tell you, I feel like I'm just gonna say it, and I've had a beard now for a year, and overall, I'd say the my peer female response to the beard has been predominantly very positive.
Well, you also look like the first ever 12-year-old radio host whenever you shave. So
right. So I just feel like we've run this experiment, and the current very lovely girlfriend likes the beard, but just in general, I'd say females out of the world have been pro buck beard. And I think that a lot of guys find that the beard, not everyone likes it, but if you're talking about the numbers, if you're balancing it out, a lot of guys find the beard gets it done. It's like we talked to, we talked to my man. Well, first of all, we have a lot of people that come on the show that are bearded. But when we were discussing with our Navy SEAL friend just now, for those of you that watch on the Pluto stream, you can see him, and that guy's got a beard and a half. That guy's got a real man beard. Just saying. Jack Carr, great beard. All right. Jim, greetings from Fort Collins, Colorado on 93.7 Freedom Radio. God, I love Team Buck Denver bringing the ruckus. Always. Love you guys. Thank you. Love the show. Listen every afternoon. Big hello to producer Mark and Tallulah. Colorado is a great, beautiful, fun place, except for our lib governor and legislature. You and your lady skier should visit. I think so. As soon as the world stops ending and there's a greater possibility of travel, I'd love to get out to. I'm just kidding. The world's obviously not ending. I'd love to get out to Colorado. I've really never been. So Denver and the whole area, it sounds like fun to me. And Freedom 93.7. Yeah. Love my Denver peeps. It's great. Arnold writes in, Buck, love the show. Do you think Saul Alinsky would relish how close this country is to the brink of disaster and capable of true radical change? As a libertarian, I'm trying not to think the worst and feel that those that favor socialism are behind the curtain of lockdown. Arnold, crisis is clearly an opportunity, and progressives throughout history, radicals throughout history have leveraged crisis in order to achieve their ends, because in more stable times, people are like, no, I don't want to take the huge risk of the leap into the unknown of greater statism or socialism or whatever it may be. Revolution is scary. Look, revolution was scary even for the people pushing for it in this country. I mean, it was either The idea was going to work out, and we're going to have this great experiment in democracy and the Constitution and all those other awesome things. Freedom, America, yeah. Or they were going to get hanged as traitors to Great Britain, right? So that was risky stuff. Risky stuff. And if Great Britain had acted differently toward the colonists, remember, they were taking too much of their stuff. I believe the line from the Declaration is eat out their substance. You know, take people's stuff and give them no redress. They get angry. It's a lesson not just from our own revolution, a lesson from history. Candace, Buck, I'm a registered nurse, dietitian, and just became a nurse practitioner in January. No, not kidding. I currently work in an ICU and take care of COVID patients. As such, I have a great deal to say about glove use during this time. Gloves provide a barrier for a specific task and are discarded to prevent contaminating other surfaces. Unless someone has an open lesion on the hands, there is no value in wearing gloves everywhere. Go about your business with frequent hand washing and hand sanitizing. Do not touch your face, eyes, etc. until washing your hands. When you arrive home, sanitize phone, glasses, keys, etc. and wash your hands. If you want to take the extra step, wash your face, because one is likely to touch his or her face at some point. Shields high for New York. Candace. Well, Candace, that's definitely, that adds up a whole lot more than what we've been told previously about this. So that makes sense to me. You know, that wearing a glove everywhere, you're just still moving around the same stuff that you'd be moving around with your bare hands. And eventually you got to take the gloves off. So it's not like if you have a glove, you're protected. It's only if you're doing certain kinds of activities and then you take the gloves off that you would have greater protection, but you still got to wash your hands and be careful. So that all makes sense. What do you think, Producer Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Yesterday, I went grocery shopping, mask, no gloves. I just sanitized my hands right after I left the store.
Yeah, I mean, and the mask is really, it sounds like it's now, I shouldn't say consensus. Science is not about consensus, my friend. Science is about the ability to replicate results from experiments using data. But it seems like there's something of a consensus, and I'm just going to say it, that the mask is most useful for preventing an individual from spreading the virus to somebody else instead of preventing you from getting it from somebody who, say, did not have a mask on. That might help a little bit, but mostly it's if you're a shedder of virus and you have a mask on, you'll be in a better position. So that's what I'm being told by the peeps who know the things. More roll call with Jared, spelled with 2 R's. Buck, I was thinking about your question about how Americans just give up their freedom without much resistance. I think what you have as a reaction from patriots is an ability to say, I see a need, and now I will be a good citizen. I see a need to follow the guidelines for a shorter period of time. Now I think you see across the country people waking up saying this is enough. As more information comes out, people are waking up. As a Michigan resident, I think you saw yesterday the first steps of resistance. Then you see the governor react with condemnation and ignorance. Buck, shields high. There's a storm brewing. Yeah, Jared, of course, right? If people, you know, here's an example. You know, we do need to look at this with as clear a mind as we can. If the governor says you have to get the heck out of your house, let's say, you know, the governor of, well, you don't tell me where you are here, Jared, but, you know, let's say the governor of Michigan. Oh, no, I think you did say that. Anyway, if the governor of Michigan, yeah, as a Michigan resident, he did say that. So if the governor of Michigan says you got to get out of your house in this area because, you know, there's this wouldn't happen in Michigan, I think, but, you know, there's like a level 4 hurricane coming and we're not going to be able to guarantee your safety or get you out of there. So we're giving an order to everybody to get out. That's one thing, because you say, okay, a storm is coming. I got to go for a day. Now, some people would still say, Buck, they don't have the authority to tell you to leave your home under any circumstances, but you can understand how somebody who does believe in individual liberty and freedom and patriotism and the Constitution would say, I can leave my house for the next 48 hours while a storm passes because I can make that decision, and that's not tyranny. Same thing if they tell you, hey, everybody, evacuate this area of Oklahoma because there's a or, evacuate this area of Kansas. There's a tornado coming. That's not tyranny. You're assuming the tornado will be there for a few hours or a day or two, and then you're going to go back to your home, and hopefully it's still there and everyone's okay. When they tell us 15 days was it 15 or I think it was 15 days, but we keep saying 2 weeks, whatever. But 2 weeks to stop the spread. I was willing to say, okay, we can as a country, we could lock down for 2 weeks. We can do that. It's a big price, but we can do that. But then we said 2 weeks, and then they said 30 days in addition to that. And now we're saying, at least here in New York, going to be another couple of weeks, probably another 30 days. This is sort of like the government telling you there's a tornado coming, leave your house. Tornado still hasn't hit, but it could any minute, so you got to leave your house for a month. That's a very different thing. So as they expand the timeline, as they expand the declaration, the infringement upon your right becomes more obvious, becomes more severe. And that's where I think we are now as a country. People are recognizing that those dictates from the government aren't just short term, aren't just one-offs out of nowhere, or one-offs with a very clear defined end date. This is just what they're telling us. This is how they're telling us to live our lives for the foreseeable. And that's where the pushback is really happening. Hey, Buck. My local station is KQNT Spokane, 590. I am from Sandpoint, Idaho, just over the Washington border. I listen every day while I'm working. You're my favorite voice in radio. Stay safe in New York and Shields High. Well, big high five, although I guess not actually touching hands, but virtual high five to everybody out in KQNT Spokane. And thank you so much all for listening. We got a very thriving Team Buck community out there in Washington. And I don't know if it's Carlton or Charlton. I'm going to guess it's Carlton with an H. But Carlton, thank you so much for writing in your kind words, and I appreciate you listening into the show. Diane, hey, Buck, I think most people have forgotten the reason for the shutdown, to flatten the curve so the hospitals wouldn't be overwhelmed. We've done that. So it's time to get back to work with reasonable precautions. People are going to catch the virus. People are even going to die from it. We were never going to avoid that. All we did was prolong the pain, not reduce it. Keep up the great work, Shields High. Diane, this is what I want an answer from the folks that are saying that they know the way forward and it's lockdown as long as we need to and keep the lockdowns going. And are we accepting that the virus is going to spread to the same number of people as if we did not have the lockdown? I never seem to be able to get a real answer about that. Are we assuming that are the measures we're taking assuming that 50% of Americans are going to get exposed to this virus, or, have been or will be exposed to this virus regardless of the lockdowns? Because we should know that, shouldn't we? It feels a little bit like they keep telling us, oh, no, just keep on doing the shutdown and then we'll beat the virus. Are we going to? Unless we get some kind of a medical breakthrough here. And I got to tell you, this virus is looking like there's a lot they don't know. There's a lot they don't understand about it. So I think that it's very important that we have real honesty from the people making the decisions, and that we, the American people, have a forthright conversation about the kinds of trade-offs and the kinds of decisions that we want to see. Greta. Hey, Buck and Mark. I'm writing from Wisconsin, where our Democratic governor just extended our safer-at-home order until May 26th. Ouch. Our current order is not even over until April 24th. Data from the Wisconsin Hospital Association shows that the peak for new cases was at the start of April, and evidently Governor Evers is willing to see what the next 2 weeks will bring before extending this government overreach. With all the political games lately in Wisconsin, I can't help but think this is happening merely because President Trump was discussing some states opening in the near future. Thank you for keeping me informed and entertained through this pandemic. Stay safe and Shields High. Yeah, Greta, I wish I could say that politics were not a big part of this, but unfortunately there's a lot of political influence in all these decisions about the economy, decisions about the virus. This is our future. This is life and death. This is big stuff, but people still want to play the usual, especially from the anti-Trump side, the usual crazy political games. Cammy. Hey, Buck, on Wednesday you said you would love a puggle. 3 years ago, I lost my girl. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Puggle, and 2 weeks later, I rescued my boy Puggle. Okay, well, that's good. I have 2 Puggle mini pin mix and a Pug Lhasa mix. Puggles are the best. I love your show. Well, Cammy, maybe we can end on that one for the weekend. Puggles, they're adorable. If you see one somewhere, go save it if it's in a shelter. Everybody, have a good weekend. Take care of yourselves. I'm going to be working on some Malta history podcast recording over the weekend. Talk to you Monday. Shields high.